From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. On Monday, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro said his country will send a document to Washington, D.C., demanding the United States to stop its threats against his nation. Maduro says a national document declaring the threats by the United States illegal will be signed by millions of Venezuelans on Wednesday. He took the direct aim at Trump while declaring that the armed forces stand ready to defend the country. The Venezuelan leader says his country is facing an unprecedented threat.
Trotsky spoke about Percival to start with a national day with a core document addressed to the people of the United States and to President Donald Trump. A document demanding him to withdraw all the threats of intervention. A document demanding the respect of the constitutionality and legality of the life in Venezuela. A document demanding the respect of international law. And we are going to have it signed starting on Wednesday by at least 10 million Venezuelans. We are going to sign the document that we are going to bring to the White House of the United States demanding respect. To speak about war in the 21st century, it's nonsense, Mr. Trump. To even think that you are going to send your army to this country that has people who will defend it, because there are men and women in Venezuela that under any circumstance will march against these inhuman thoughts.
And in an interview with RT, President Maduro has vowed not to betray his country, saying he's not giving in to Washington calls.
I do not care how I'm going to go down in history. I'm not going to be a traitor, a weak one, like a one who turned his back on his history commitments to his people.
Also say that Donald Trump is calling for a coup in Venezuela in order to get his hands on the country's vast natural resources.
I take advantage of every means of communication to ask the whole world to come forward to denounce and stop the madness of Donald Trump. Venezuela is never going to give in.
Earlier we spoke to Alan Woods, a political activist and founder of Hands Off Venezuela. When we asked about the recent humanitarian aid to the U.S. has pledged to Venezuela, this is what he had to say.
The United States were interested in helping the people of Venezuela in any sense, then they would certainly not have stolen billions of dollars from FtS or from the Venezuelan people. Oh, and I might add to that the British government also, the Bank of England, has quite shamelessly, this has not been reported in general, but it's a fact, has deliberately refused to hand over billions of dollars worth of Venezuelan gold, which is, again, is the property of the Venezuelan people. So this is sheer hypocrisy. And I would venture to say, I would venture to give the opinion that this so-called humanitarianism is merely a provocation designed to conceal an act of aggression and potentially military intervention, I would say.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has slammed the United States and the European Union for trying to oust President Maduro's government.
We know now what the EU is, what kind of democracy it is. On one hand, you say Democrats, and ballot box. And on the other, you will, through violence and rules, overthrow an elected government. Is Venezuela one of your states? How dare you tell an elected person to leave and deliver the head of state to the one who did not even run in the elections?
The Ecuadorian Foreign Minister José Valencia has confirmed that Ecuador will join a meeting in Uruguay to discuss the political situation in Venezuela. This session, hosted by the European Union and the Uruguayan government, will be held on Thursday, February 7 in Montevideo. 13 EU and Latin American countries will participate. Valencia said Ecuador will look for what they call a democratic solution under which Venezuelans go to the elections.
We must be clear and assertive about our position on Venezuela. The answer must be democratic. The Venezuelan people have to vote and decide at the polls. Transparent and open elections must be conducted by a transitional government, respecting human rights. Ecuador will be at the meeting. We were invited to join this group, which wants a prompt solution in Venezuela and exchanging points of view.
A meeting of the so-called Lima Group in Ottawa, Canada on Monday, where they were discussing the political situation in Venezuela, was interrupted by protesters. Two women unfolded a banner and chanted, "Hands off Venezuela," in reference to Canada's recognition of the Venezuelan opposition lawmaker who declared himself interim president. The protesters were escorted away by security. Protests also took place in 5 different Canadian cities against the meeting, which was being held in Ottawa. These are images from Toronto in front of the offices of Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland. The message was clear: hands off Venezuela, no sanctions, no coup. And a small demonstration was also held in Vancouver, British Columbia, on the other side of the country. The group of Canadians say that they disapproved of their government's foreign meddling. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. On Monday, a protest was held in New York in front of the offices of U.S. Mission to the United Nations, demanded that Washington stop intervention in the internal affairs of Venezuela.
So they're such hypocrites because they're talking about a coup d'etat, the sanctions against Venezuela, a possible coup. They're directly interfering in Venezuelan affairs. I mean, disinvestment, capital flight by the rich in Venezuela. A lot of people don't know the causes of the poverty and the problems that Venezuela's having. When you don't want to play ball with U.S. corporations, the U.S. is gonna attack you one way or another. Economically, they'll even resort to violence.
And what they are trying to do in Venezuela is indicative of them being against the government. Although what they are trying to do is unprecedented, to have a coup d'etat with the president still present. That's unprecedented, but that is indicative of them being very vigorous gangsters. They are a gangster government.
Economic, political, and hopefully not military intervention of the United States has created many difficulties for the people of the world, in Venezuela, in Latin America, in the Caribbean, in Africa, and Asia as well. In all parts of the world, the position of the imposition of the United States and their choice of government. This always results in the people being more poor, more disenfranchised, and with an even more difficult struggle for justice.
Yesterday, we spoke to Max Blumenthal, editor of The Gray Zone, on the situation in Venezuela. We asked him about the claim that Venezuela's opposition represents the moderate left of the country.
Yeah, this is a hilarious claim that's been put forward mainly through English online platforms. And that's because the Popular Will Party that Leopoldo Lopez, who led the 2002 coup and who is himself from an extremely oligarchic family, founded, and which Juan Guaido is a part of, is a member of the International Socialist Organizations. But if you actually look at who's a member of the International Socialist Organizations, you'll see a swath of Zionist organizations in Israel that people in the international left would never accept, as well as the National Democratic Institute, which is funded by the US government and was involved in training members of the Popular Will Party. If you look at what the Popular Will Party represents on the ground, it's been involved in street violence. Juan Guaido has personally been involved in the violent guerimbas, and he has proposed to accept a gigantic IMF loan and privatize the state oil company and hand state assets over to international investors, which is perfectly in line with what right-wing parties across Latin America represent. So what the U.S. would want is someone like Guaido to take over and bring Venezuela into the right-wing Lima group. His party and the Venezuelan opposition are absolutely not anywhere on the left. And if they're on the center left, maybe they would be in line with the center left in the U.S., which aligns with the center right anywhere else in the world.
Now, Max, how do you think public opinion has been influenced by corporate media coverage?
Well, it's unclear how public opinion in the U.S. is influenced by it because there is a real crisis of legitimacy around the mainstream media and its role in constantly lying Americans into one war and intervention after another that don't work out in the end. And yet corporate media continues to do the same thing it's done again and again. We recently saw Reuters Latin America make its Twitter background a photograph of Juan Guaido punching his fist in the air like he was Nelson Mandela. Reuters is heavily promoting Guaido. And if you look at the bureau chiefs for Bloomberg or the Washington Post or the New York Times in Caracas, they're solidly pro-opposition. They have been against this government since Hugo Chavez came into power. There's a culture within corporate and mainstream media in the U.S. when it covers Latin America of always lining up with the opposition parties in Nicaragua, in Venezuela, and being heavily critical of the government in Cuba to the point where editors don't actually have to impose a line. It's really just part of the culture. And it is acceptable for them to be so partisan that they actually function as spokespeople for the opposition, as I wrote about the way the coup in Nicaragua was covered last year.
Now, you spoke with Congress members on Capitol Hill about meddling in Venezuela. What do you think of their responses?
Well, you'd see so much ignorance in the responses I got, where I would simply ask, is the U.S. meddling in Venezuela? Many of them, first of all, couldn't draw the connection to the constant debate on Capitol Hill about Russian meddling in the U.S., where Russia is accused of, hacking and, putting some bots on Twitter, whereas the U.S. is actually trying to install a new government and threatening to bomb the country unless they agree. And so you see the mentality of American exceptionalism on display, but you also see the ignorance because many of the members of Congress couldn't even comment on this vital situation. And some said that they were just waiting for a briefing. In other words, they were waiting for their marching orders. And it really shows how easy it is for the permanent war state in America to get its way on Capitol Hill because you have 438 people who are generally like a bunch of sheep and won't stand in their way. Only 5 members of Congress so far have spoken up against U.S. intervention in Venezuela.
Now, why don't more lawmakers reject their own government's intervention?
I think partly it's cowardice. One person I'd point to as someone who's been timid is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has kind of become a minor celebrity or a major celebrity since being elected. She's, in her 30s. She's very telegenic. Her Twitter account has, I think, over 1 million followers. Every time she tweets something, it gets tens of thousands of retweets. And she claims to be extremely progressive and a socialist, and yet she has not said a word about the prospect of the U.S. attacking Venezuela to install a new government and steal its assets. And you would think that it wouldn't be hard for her to say something, but clearly she has greater ambitions in politics, and she's afraid of standing in the way of the permanent war state. And that is a really sad statement on where politics are at in the U.S.
Moving on to Ecuador, a press investigation has revealed new information about the murder of the Ecuadorian journalist from the newspaper El Comercio and their driver last year. Our correspondent from Ecuador, Denise Herrera, has the details.
A new report has revealed several irregularities in the newly declassified information by the Ecuadorian government concerning the murders of the team of the Comercio newspaper at the border with Colombia. The relatives have questioned the details released by the government about the time of the kidnapping and secret military operations between Colombia and Ecuador that might have led to the deaths of their journalists.
Ecuadorian authorities and the Attorney General Office believe that Paul, Javier, and Efrain crossed the border without the knowledge of military. but Rehenes, as well as other documents and media investigations, has revealed that the military knew of the journalists' movements and that the group had authorization to cross the border.
The relatives have confirmed that several investigations showed that the government was negotiating the release of the Comercio staff. They have called on the Attorney General to carry out an investigation in order to bring justice to the plotters of the murder.
The Rehenes investigation has interviewed some former members of the group that kidnapped the journalist, as well as other people, and found that the journalist's release was planned, or at least there was correspondence between the criminals and the government within the first 24 hours of the kidnapping. It was not the intention of the criminal group to stay with the abducted group for very long, meaning the kidnappers had realized their mistake.
The relatives have also called President Lenin Moreno to reveal the truth of their deaths. They add that it seems the government wants to close the case as soon as possible, but suddenly different questions are now put on the table.
Was their release not convenient for them? For whom were the murders convenient? So they couldn't reveal information or the things that they may have learned whilst they were detained? For whom is the death for alias Guacho actually convenient?
The relatives say they will go to several international courts to prove the government lies and in pursuit of justice. They will also ask the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to link the new report in their investigation that will be published in March. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
Now to Brazil, where the Workers' Party will propose a bill in Congress for the immediate closure of upstream mining waste dams across the country. Workers' Party Congressman Rogério Correia from Minas Gerais, where the Vale Dam disaster happened, is set to present a bill that will close all mining waste dams that use the upstream method, the cheapest but also the least safe dam design. A total of 134 people died in Brazil after a dam collapsed in the city of Brumadinho. 300 people are still missing. Andre Vieira has more.
Recovery efforts continue in the city of Brumadinho after a dam collapsed and left, up until now, 134 dead and almost 200 missing. Experts are alert to the possible emergence of illnesses due to the collapse. Let's recall that in 2015, another dam owned by the same company, Vale, collapsed, leading to the spread of diseases like yellow fever. It means there's a huge risk to well-being after the disaster in Brumadinho. Meanwhile, social movements have asked for special attention to be paid to other dams that are in the same situation as the Mariana Dam that collapsed in 2015, and that which broke this year. The situation is very complicated and the consequences are severe. Many of these mining companies pose a risk to the citizens of Brazil. Back to you.
The number of homeless people in Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires, has increased as the economic situation in the country worsens. Let's hear more in this report.
Every day, the number of families sleeping on the streets multiplies as they have no resources to rent a house. This is just one of the most visible consequences of the economic crisis. 2 out of 10 residents in Buenos Aires are poor.
We need to analyze and take into account the political situation and the austerity measures launched by the government. They are affecting the most vulnerable people in Argentinian society.
It's a question of political will. This government wants the rich to be richer and the poor to be poor. This government wants to keep social differences. So the son of a poor worker will also be a poor worker, and the son of a rich businessman will also be a rich businessman.
The number of people living in misery went from 100,000 in 2015 to 188,000 in 2018. It is estimated that 23.6% of them became homeless in less than a year. Poverty reaches 639,000 people, 21% of the population in the richest area of the country.
The government is not sensitive at all. There have been people sleeping in front of the government buildings for some time now, but nobody cares. There are families with children, pets, with all their belongings that are homeless. You can see they're new poor because they live at the streets, but have their mobile phones.
While 10% of the population lives in extreme poverty, almost 2.5 million Argentinians have no access to basic food. The social gap keeps widening. The richest get 1/3 of the income, 31.8%, while the poorest just get 1.7%.
This leads to many premature deaths, pensioners who cannot get their medicines. And the worst part is the government talking about Venezuela instead of what's going on here. The mainstream media remain silent, as they are aligned to the financial power.
The hard situation poor people face is getting more visible in the city, where the social gap keeps increasing. The number of people living in poverty has sharply increased in the last year. The figures are clear. 30.5 million people in the country are poor.
We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. An Egyptian parliamentary committee on Tuesday approved proposed constitutional amendments to allow President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to stay in power until 2034. The amendments are directed at boosting the president's control of the judiciary and to give the president more time to implement economic development plans. The approval is the first step needed to move forward with the constitutional changes, which are expected to finally endorsed by Parliament and then move to a referendum within a few months.
In 1934, U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt amended the Constitution and increased the presidential limits during the Second World War. These were compulsory circumstances due to war. In 1976, Egypt, President Mohammed Anwar al-Sadat amended the 1971 Constitution due to war. We are going through a war that is more intense than these wars. The war in Sinai and the wars we are facing by other countries that I would like not to name.
The Democratic Republic of Congo's new president, Felix Tshisekedi, has defended his election victory as he visits neighboring Angola. On his first trip abroad since being sworn in last month, the new president said the opposition failed to bring evidence that they won before the Constitutional Court. He said his party presented the necessary evidence, meaning the court declared him the winner.
On the other hand, we, who were declared winners, had prepared. We had our electoral center that had collected data, and we even compared it with Senko, which claimed to have its own figures, to show that we worked on the preparation of our victory.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has said corrupt officials in his government will face the full wrath of the law. Addressing delegates at the ongoing mining investment conference in Cape Town, the president responded to corruption scandals in both the African National Congress Party and the government. He warned that some officials will end up going to jail.
We have emerged from the recommendations that come out will be acted on. There will be prosecutions. There clearly will be prosecutions, and some people will end up going to jail and go and wear orange overalls.
Now it's time to bring you some other stories from around the world.
Actor Liam Neeson has denied being racist after he revealed in an interview that he wanted to kill a black man to avenge the rape of a friend whose attacker, Neeson said, was black. In an interview to British newspaper The Independent, he said that he'd spent maybe a week walking near pubs, carrying a weapon, hoping that a black man would provoke him so he could kill him.
There were some nights I went out deliberately into black areas in this city looking to be set upon so that I could unleash physical violence. And I did it for, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 times until I caught myself on. And it really shocked me, this primal urge I had.
The Greek Prime Minister is on a 2-day visit to Turkey where he met with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And on top of the agenda was the extradition of 8 Turkish soldiers in Greece. Turkey has accused the soldiers of orchestrating the failed coup against President Erdogan in 2016. The soldiers later fled to Greece.
Regarding the thorny case of the 8 soldiers, for which the Greek justice system has made clear decisions, I want to state once more that Greece, as a just state, has to respect the decisions of the justice system. In Greece, of course, coup plotters are not welcome. However, what comes first at the moment is to strengthen our collaboration in the security sector.
In New York, it's day 2 of jury deliberations in the trial of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Guzman is accused of leading Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, which became one of the most infamous drug trafficking organizations in the world. The 11-week trial featured testimony from more than 50 witnesses. Guzman faces life imprisonment if convicted.
We come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.